Take a look at this nice web page animation I have here. So yeah, I have this navbar here, and when I scroll and I get to this point, you can see the way the thing collapses. If I hover, it expands again, and if I stop hovering, it collapses, and if I scroll back to the top, it expands. And this animation is actually inspired by Oge's website. Oge is an amazing designer and creator. So if you scroll, it collapses. If you hover, you have this. If you scroll back to the top, it expands. And in this video, I'll be teaching you how I built this. I used HTML, CSS, and a bit of JavaScript, and I'm hoping that you get to learn some amazing tips from this tutorial. So we'll be starting from this. This is the result on the right here. So this is the HTML part. I have a div here with a class of landing and an ID of landing. Then I have a div with a class of links, and then I have all my links here. Now in all these links, I have the style attribute, and here I have an index custom property of 0, index 1, index 2, and I would show you in the CSS why I'm using this index custom property. But I also have a z index of 7, z index of 6, z index of 5, and this is so that the first link will be above the second link, the second link will be above the third link up until the end. And then in this main, I just have some random text here, which you can see at the bottom. Now going to the styles, I have a body with the background color of this. The landing element has a height of 100 VH, which is the screen height. And here for the links, we have display flex, and these links have a position of fixed. Now for each of these links here, we have a color black, we have a transition for the color property, background property, and left property, and we have a custom width and a custom margin right property. I use the custom width property for this width here. I use the custom magic right property for this here, and I'm going to show you in a second why I am doing that. For the JavaScript, we'll get back to this in a minute. And the first thing I want to do is I want to declare a custom transparency property of 90%. I love custom properties a lot because they are very flexible and allows me to change my styles easily. If you'd love to learn more about custom properties, I have a video on that, and I'll link it in the video description below. And for the background, I use the color mix function to mix white and transparent, and I'm mixing a transparent of 90% by default, which is this custom property I set here. Then I can change the color here to be white. Now I have my color mix. Now if I scroll, you can see the Deeecode at the back here. It doesn't have any special effects. If we go back to Oge's website here, you can see that at the back of these links there is it's like a glass effect. It's blur. Well, we can do the same thing here by using a background filter, and we apply a blur of 3 pixels. Now if I refresh, you can now see we have that glass effect with the Deeecode text at the back. Now when you hover on a link, we're going to change the color to black, and we change the transparency to 20%. Once you hover, you can see the transparency now is 20%, which means the white is now more obvious. Let's now apply our collapse effect. So I'm just going to come here for this landing. I'm going to apply a collapsed class, and then here we can now say that .landing.collapsed, then we can style the links. This is where some interesting things are going to happen. So I'm going to declare a custom property called x space, and x space is basically going to be the width of a link plus the margin right. So here I can say calc, and then I have my width custom property plus I have my margin right custom property. Now I'm going to have another custom property which I call start x position, or you can call this start x distance, but let's just keep it as start x position. And the idea of start x position is, for example, the first link, the start x position is going to be 0, which is this point here. This is where the link starts from. But then maybe for product, the start x position is going to be from this point, the beginning of the container on the left, up until this point where the link starts from. And the same thing for blog is going to be this point here to this point where blog starts from. So for start x position, I'm now going to do calc again, x space multiply by the index. Remember, the index is coming from here, then multiplied by -1. So for example, let's take the first link, home, which has an index of 0. That is going to be x space. So x space currently is 100 pixels plus 10 pixels. So that's like 110 pixels. So that's going to be 110 pixels multiplied by 0 multiplied by -1. So the start x position for this is going to be 0 because anything multiplied by 0 is 0. Now the start x position for work, if we come here, work has has an index of 1. So this is going to be 100 pixels times 1 times minus 1. And the reason why I'm doing minus 1 is because of the negative distance. The start X position for this second link is going to be from this point here. And then if we have an index of 4, which is going to be the case for tools, that's going to be 440 pixels, which is going to be from here up until this point where tools starts from. So I'm going to change this back to var x space multiplied by var index multiplied by minus 1. So now that we have our start X position, we can now come here when we have landing collapse links A, and then we can change the left property to be start X position. And now if I come here and refresh, you can now see that we have been able to calculate the start X position for all the links, and all of them are now at the beginning here. We can now say that when you hover on the links element, all of the anchor tags should have a left of 0. Now once you hover, you can see it spreads out. You can click any link, and when you stop hovering, it goes back. Okay, now that we have this, one more thing we want to add is an offset. Now if you go back to Oge's website, you can see when the links collapse, you can see that at the back it's like they are coming out one after the other here. So here we can also apply an offset. And for this offset, I'll come here again, declare another custom property called offset. And here I'm going to calculate the index multiplied by, let's say, 8 pixels. And then for this left, I'm going to do another calc. So I'm going to say start X position plus the offset. So the offset for the first element is going to be 0 times 8. So there's no offset for the first element. Second element is going to be 1 times 8. Third element is going to be 2 times 8, and so on. And now you have this. If you even come here and you make this 10 pixels, you have more offset. But let me even make this smaller by keeping this at 6. Another thing you notice is that when you collapse, the first link has a background color of white, and then it's hard to read because the other elements are at the back. So you can say landing links, and when the links is currently not being hovered on, select the first child anchor tag, and we give this a color of black. So now if we come here, you can see that when we're not hovering, the first link now has a color of black, so you can read it. But then when you hover, it goes back to a color of white, which it was before. Okay, now that we have this, we can now apply our scroll so that when you scroll, it collapses, and when you go back to the top, it is expanded. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to remove this collapsed class so that we have this. So actually, another thing we need to do, you can see the first link has a color of black. So to fix this, we can say landing collapse. So when the landing is collapsed and the links is currently not in the hover, then we select the first child and give it the color of black. Now we can go to JavaScript. So in JavaScript here, the first thing I do is I get the landing elements from the DOM using query selector. Query selector allows you to select elements using CSS selectors. So yeah, I have the hash symbol with landing, and this would select this element. Okay, now that we have this, we're going to apply a scroll event on the window. There are several ways you can do this. I'm just using the traditional scroll event way, but there are probably better or easier ways you can do this. So when you're scrolling, the first thing I want to do is I want to get the scroll top, which is going to be window.scroll. No, scroll Y. So I'm going to call this scroll Y. So the idea of scroll Y is, let me do console.log scroll Y, my console here. So scroll Y, currently it is 0, as you can see here, and then the more you scroll, the more values you have. Let me use math.floor too, so that I can have a how do you call it, a non-float number. Now I have rounded up figures. So I'm going to get the scroll Y, and I'm also going to get the screen height, which is going to be window.inner height. I can now say that if the scroll Y is greater than the screen height, remember that the landing element has a height of the whole screen, because here we use 100 VH. So I'm now going to say once you scroll past that landing, we are now going to collapse this. So here I'll say the scroll Y is more than the screen height. Then on the landing element, I'm going to add a class of collapsed. But if the scroll Y is not greater than the screen height, landing element class list dot remove collapse. And that is pretty much all I need. So if I come here and refresh, currently it is expanded. Now as I scroll and scroll and scroll, once I scroll past that landing, you can see the way it collapses. If you hover, you still have this. If you stop hovering, it goes back to the collapse. And if you keep scrolling, we have that still collapsed. And then when you scroll back to the top where it is now less than the screen height, then we have this now expanded. If you'd love to see the code for this demo, I have it on my website deeecode.com/CSS demos. I'll leave a link below so you can check it out. But I hope this was helpful, and I hope you learned 1 or 2 CSS or JavaScript tips from this. If you did, please let me know what you learned in the comments below. And also, I'd appreciate if you give this video a like, share with others, and subscribe for more demo tutorials like this.